So for a bit of a change of pace, shall we move on to Captain Phillips?
Yeah, and this is really different from every other film on this list, I think, Scott, isn't it? It's more than any
right
others.
Up for modern piracy,
Yeah. So real-life pirates again here, and the only contemporary ones we'll encounter in this episode, with this film based on a true story, the usual assumed provisos here, of the hijacking of the MV Maersk Alabama and the taking hostage of its captain, Richard Phillips, by Somali pirates in 2009. Shot in a pseudo-documentary style, the film begins with Captain Phillips saying goodbye to his wife and setting off for his next trip as a merchant marine in command of a container ship on a route around the Horn of Africa, and then his preparations aboard ship for its departure, particularly anti-piracy defences. Meanwhile, a group of Somalis working for a warlord assemble a crew to attempt to hijack a ship. Naturally, these two things soon collide, and after initially having been fought off, the pirates return and board the ship, where Philip's well-drilled crew ensure things don't go to plan for the Somalis, and they leave with wounds, a little cash, at least compared to what they expected to get, and, unfortunately for him, Captain Phillips, who must hope that the US Navy can rescue him. I thought when I last watched this film, back in the long ago before times of 2014, that the pirates were given short shrift as far as backstory goes. I felt that less this time, though I would certainly have liked the hints that are given about a degree of lack of choice in their career to have been expounded upon. Beyond any wider-ranging, deeper causes such as globalisation, colonialism and income inequality, knowing whether the pirates are pirates because they are violent thieves or because they'll be killed if they don't do it hugely changes the dynamics and the way the audience feels about them. But, well, they're at least not one-dimensional villains here. Talking of the pirates, while Paul Greengrass directs established actors aboard the crew of the Alabama, notably Tom Hanks in the title role, he cast amateur Somali actors as the pirates. That's a strange, often self-congratulatory thing that happens every now and again in films, and that, actually, as Craig observed when he talked about this film back in the one-liner days, tends to show that anyone can do this job. It can backfire in other ways, of course, but for me, it largely works here, particularly Barkhad Abdi, who has gone on to parts in the Sky and Blade Runner 2049 since, as Abdulwale Muse, the leader of the pirate group, who brings a nervous energy and caginess to the role that works well with a character who is dangerous but also scared, and in some ways out of his depth. Why Tom Hanks persists in trying to do accents here in Massachusetts, when they are very much not the strength of his, continues to baffle me, particularly when it's irrelevant to either the character or setting, at least as portrayed in this fictionalised version of the events. But it's a great performance from him otherwise, with his final scene being particularly effective, and a huge journey from the competent, stoic mariner of the film's first half. Greengrass's direction gradually builds attention, with a marked lack of sensationalism in the camera work of the editing, by keeping the audience involved intimately with the characters and allowing the performances, locations and the increasing stakes to increase the pressure, with the lengthy scene in the claustrophobic confines of a lifeboat particularly effective, before a quietly powerful final scene sees Philip's ordeal really hit him. It's a very solid thriller and definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it before.
Yes, I hadn't seen this before, actually. Somehow a bit of an oversight. I don't know if... I went through a phase of being tired of Paul Greengrass. And maybe had I watched it in that time frame, which would have been around about when this came out, and I might have not liked it so much, because a lot of it is very Paul Greengrassy. But with a bit of distance and a bit of separation, I can see that it really works for this film in a way that it didn't for the kind of vaguely similarly themed United 93, which I just found annoying. But the way that he gets so close and sort of in the face with these kind of cramped conditions sort of suits this film in particular really well. And as you say, you're very good at cranking up tension and keeping you like really involved and in the face of everyone that's going through this. And a highly effective thriller. For me, I very much enjoyed it. Yes, so don't have anything much to add over what you said there. I think you've covered anything that I would want to applaud as well. Particularly, of course, Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks does really well in this. It's a great performance and a really effective closing scene, as you say. So yes, again, another film I would quite highly recommend. Yes, works incredibly well. Yeah, could have done with a little bit more backstory as to why people are being driven into piracy, if that's the kind of angle they wanted to take. But I suppose it's given just about as much detail as you need for what is effectively a blockbuster thriller film, rather than a deep documentary on the global capitalism and the Somali culture and all that sort of stuff. So yes, I did enjoy this quite a lot, and I would certainly recommend it to anyone. Very good thriller, and one of Greengrass's better efforts in my opinion.
Yeah, United, back when we talked about it in our previous podcast, Scott, United 93 was one of the things I mentioned. It's like, it came as like, United 93 was pretty terrible, and there's a lot of similarities here in terms of the approach and things like that, but this is just so much more effective. And yeah, like there's enough of the Somali pirates backstory in it, like, so as I said, they're not one-dimensional victims. They're not just simply the bad guys.
Yeah.
But there was a bit of dialogue. They're talking about, like, oh yeah, Muse is saying, oh, we're fishermen. And Tom Hanks says to them, like, oh, you could be something else. Oh, there's choices. Yeah, it's like, it's not just fishermen, fishermen or piracy. And he says, maybe in America, Irish, maybe in America.
Yeah.
And like, it's that section, it felt like to me like it was screaming out for a scene like in Three Kings, when the guy's torturing, the torturer is like talking about like the disparity between the cultures and the economy and like the things the United States done bad and stuff like that. Just that, whether it would have fitted in, maybe not, but that just felt like it was like the right place to put something like that. And then when you have the bit later when like Tom Hanks sees the kind of things that Moose is willing to do, and he says, "You're not just a fisherman, are you?" Like, more, please. I want you to explore that a bit more. Again, arguably not the setting for it, but I was vaguely frustrated that they didn't go to, because that could have been really interesting. You're stymied somewhat in that the character doesn't speak particularly fluent English, so having kind of a back and forth on that is not really going to work believably. So that's maybe one of a few reasons you wouldn't have it in there. That could have been really quite good. You can have a scene in the lifeboat where they're discussing, because I mean so much of it's all just invented anyway. So maybe they could have had that conversation. Who knows? They've been in that lifeboat for 3 days or something. But while they're in there, they could have had this philosophical argument or political argument that could have been quite interesting, and it wouldn't have to be particularly long. It's a 2-hour film. You could have done 5 minutes of that without too much trouble, I would imagine. Would it maybe have broken the tension? Is maybe the biggest argument I could think of to not do that. But again, it's irrelevant. It's a very good thriller. It's particularly good Tom Hanks performance. Once again, I'm wondering like how his performance in Greyhound was so anodyne. When apparently that was a passion project, and this he was an actor for hire, and he gives such a good performance. And it's like there's some similarities to the conditions he finds himself in, and that sort of thing. That's why I mentioned that in particular, not just because it's on the sea. Whether it's Hanks's best performance as a whole film, I don't know, but honestly, I don't think I've seen him do anything better than that final scene.
It's a powerful moment, isn't it?
And it's absolutely believable too. I mean, things like death scenes, for instance. There's such a wide range of those, but like, well, who knows what that would actually be like, and it's really hard to do. But I think the subtle ones tend to be the best, and there's like quite a lot of subtlety in that. It's like the bewilderment, the shock, and things like that. Is just a very impressive scene from it. It's like I don't think I've seen him do better than that one scene, and I'm really rather impressed. But I'd forgotten quite how affecting that scene was and how believable it is. In as much as my first-hand experience of incredibly traumatized people isn't great, as you can imagine, for it's the case for most people, but it had a real ring of truthiness to it, as you're fond of saying, Scott. Definitely one to check out if you haven't done so already.
Absolutely.